Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Business Roundtable Podcast. We have a couple of returning Roundtable members. I am your host, David Carr of Steward Your Business. If you've not listened to this for the first time for some reason, my focus on Steward Your Business is helping organizations, business owners, team leaders bring their team together through organizational health, knowing themselves well to lead themselves. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the podcast today. Thank you, Charlie. Chen coming back. Why don't you do a brief introduction just for those that may have not heard in a while and just to share background briefly for our listeners.
For sure. Thank you for having me again,
Absolutely.
David. I'm glad I haven't, what do you call it, outstayed my welcome.
Yeah, you've been consistent. You've
So,
been on the last few episodes, so we're glad to have you back, Charlie.
thank you. And it's my pleasure. So, my name is Charlie Chen, almost like the detective Charlie Chan, off by one letter for the older folks. And I'm the Chief Experience Officer over at Intellisys. We do cybersecurity for small to mid-sized businesses. And our action statement is to always deliver wow. So basically, we're committed to delivering that world-class customer hospitality, customer experience that you don't typically see with the IT industry. And so just delivering that peace of mind while having that amazing experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So glad to have you back. And Bill, we've had you been traveling and whatnot, so we're really glad to have you back.
Yep. Oh, I'm glad to be back.
Yeah.
And
And
my
Bill, I
name
know you're
is
doing a lot of things too, right? I know you've been working on a book. You've been tell us what you've been up to. What Bill?
oh
Where's Bill
wow.
been?
I had to stop myself and go, okay, how many jobs am I trying to complete in week in, week out? And I came up with 7.
Oh wow.
So but yeah, I am I am working on a series of books on leadership, on a particular style of leadership I call ethical leadership, which follows 9 actionable behaviors. It used to be 8, but I realized that there was a 9th.
Okay.
And yeah, don't tell Mo.
I know we talked about that. We got that
I'm
past episode. How to write a book.
I know. I think I've got it. I think I've got it figured out for me. So,
All right.
but yeah, and so I'm working on that. I'm working on my Master's of Divinity in Marketplace Ministry, which is focused on the marketplace. I mean, that's really pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
So it works really well with my business background. Which has a focus in leadership, and I've actually decided that I'm going to continue on and get a doctorate in strategic leadership after I'm done with the master's degree, and continue.
All right.
Continue on.
We'll have another doctor on
I'm
the
excited
podcast. We'll have another
Yep.
doctor. Doc C, and we're gonna have Doc H here. So, looking forward to that. Well, hey guys, I thought it would be interesting. I came off just recently last week. I was gone on actually a cruise, which was a lot of fun, but with Giant Worldwide, which you guys know I've talked about before. And one of the conversations that came out of that event, helping me be a better business owner, be a better guide, be a better coach, was this concept of what are the rules you live by, specifically what are the prohibitions and the inhibitions that you live by, whether consciously or unconsciously. And so I thought maybe we can talk about that. I'd love to get your input as a leader. We're just talking about leadership for yourself and for your team. Bill, how do you do that in business successfully? How do you identify those things and not have them affect you negatively? And so that's really where I want to go in this episode today, is really looking at this theme of internal inhibitions and external prohibitions, if you will. And then how can we use those to help shape our businesses, help grow our team? And I may throw in some of the 5 voices framework from Giant, because that's what I love, but I want to hear from you guys too, of maybe some different ways of looking at it. And so some of the things I want to dig into with you guys is how do your self-imposed inhibitions perhaps limit your leadership or decision making? Perhaps external prohibitions shape your leadership behaviors or that within your organization? And then what can we do as business owners and leaders to break free of those things that are not serving us? So that's where we're going. Appreciate all of you guys listening in or following us along on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. And we always love comments, feedback to all of our episodes. So we hope as you're listening and watching this, you guys are going to get a lot of benefit from hearing from Charlie and Bill and myself as we kind of wrestle through these, identifying and defining what these inhibitions and prohibitions are for us. So I'll just start first with defining what I define inhibition from, and then I'll come to you, Bill, and then Charlie. But I look at the inhibition as really internal limitations or beliefs that I impose on myself. It's not coming externally. It's something that I've chosen, again, consciously or unconsciously. It could come from fear, past experiences, maybe the need for validation. For example, a business owner may be holding themselves back for pursuing growth due to a fear of failure. Like, I don't want to lose. So there's some inhibitions there. So I'm just going to start with that inhibition, and I want to come to you, Lil, and get your take on just defining and wrapping our arms around the word inhibition, and yeah, what were your thoughts there?
Well, one of the thoughts I had on inhibitions, and it works well with you saying that it's an internal like an internal mechanism, is a portion of ethics, specifically egoism, which is doing what you feel is best at the time. And which I actually used that definition to destroy an ethics class in my undergrad. Completely using it to disprove the existence of ethics beyond egoism. Well, beyond enlightened egoism, which would be that once the egoist realizes that the concerns and needs of others are their own concerns, and the old saying that a rising tide has the ability to lift all boats. But yeah, and that, once you decide on these things, you're kind of a little stuck with them for a bit. You can always get out of them, but it's you've got to break it down. You've got to work your way out of these self beliefs. Now, they can include beliefs from a wide variety of systems, whether they be humanist or religious or what have you. But they are it all boils down to what you believe is right at the time that you're doing it, and that's all coming from the back of your head, from your history, from your experiences, and training, and what all else. But yeah, and that you need to, that if those beliefs aren't serving your best interests, which is what internal beliefs are concerned about, then you need to figure out a way to get rid of them.
Yep. And we're gonna get into that. I want to definitely want to dig into that. So
that's really how I'm looking at the inhibitions.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely. We're gonna get into the next segment. We'll talk a little bit more about identifying some of these current ones, and then get to like some practical application about how you guys have overcome inhibitions. But Charlie, but for you, when I say the word inhibition, I think what's your initial response? What's your initial take on that?
Yeah. First step is just awareness, right? Because like you had talked about, whether consciously or subconsciously, and more often than not, it's subconscious. We've got this habitual pattern that's already set, and it's almost like the script of our lives that's running the show, and it's just the same storyline that keeps playing out over and over again. And so that's the inhibitions that are there, like the stories and meanings, and like you said, maybe disempowering beliefs that we've just wound up um, like hanging on to without realizing it, that dictates how life shows up, and how we show up for ourselves, how other people show up for us. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's that, everybody has that filter.
Mm-hmm.
And just part of the phenomenon of being a human being, we're automatic meaning making machines. Everything that happens or doesn't, everything
Right.
that's said or not said, there's a meaning that gets attached to everything automatically. We don't have to, think about that. And so it actually takes awareness and conscious effort and introspection to examine those.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw up a little visual here for you guys as we talk about the other part. So inhibition is like, as you see in this picture, for those of you that are listening, you're going to go watch us on YouTube or catch us on our LinkedIn broadcast. But you'll see the question marks are all in the head, like you said, making meaning, Charlie. And then prohibition are those enforced restrictions. So prohibitions, I think, are a lot easier to identify because you have to know it's actually something that's like the speed limit, right? We know the speed limit. We know when we're in violation of it, when we know when we're abiding by it. Prohibitions are these external rules or expectations exposed by culture. Now, they could be unwritten, but oftentimes it's pretty clear this is an enforced restriction. So if it's enforced, it has to be documented some way, or there's no way to enforce it, right? So that's what I'm looking when I'm saying prohibition. We've, you literally said, hey, we're going to define, put this limitation in place. So this can be good and this can be bad. It just depends. And I'll give you an example of like an organization that maybe prioritizes consensus building. Like, hey, we want to bring everybody to the table. We want to make sure everybody gets heard. Which if that's the that's kind of the mandate. Hey, that's what we do. If you don't do consensus building, if they say that, then that could affect the company, the business, and their ability to make decisive action or how they can innovate, because they say, well, that's prohibited. You cannot just make a decision by yourself. It must have consensus. Again, could work in both ways, but that tied then with inhibition, if you're not aware, like you were saying, Charlie, inhibitions and these prohibitions work together, and then it's potential that these internal limitations combined with these external limitations may make them feel even more confining. So if you're I'm going to use the pioneer voice for those of you who aren't familiar with the 5 choices, but the pioneer voice is very much of a visionary, and if they have to be confined to you must have a consensus every time to get things done, that's going to be really challenging for them to be successful. So going back to you, Charlie, and come back to Bill here, just briefly, thoughts on prohibition as a contrast to inhibition, Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to prohibition, there's either the stick or the carrot, right? So typically, uh, so stick meaning like law and order, right? Like punishment or playing hardball or bad cop, right? So if you do this, you get this write up, and then you get this many write ups, you're out. 3 strikes and you're out, right? So um, there's, I would say, definitely cases where that would be useful, like if there's dishonesty, things that violate the basis of trust, right? So, and then there's a lot of gray areas where you would want to use the carrot, which is incentivizing the right behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do have a customer bill of rights that we've created. It's called the Intellisys Way. And so we have a never and always list on there. So in a sense, the never is our inhibition, our prohibition list,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not like writing people up if they wind up accidentally saying, no problem, as opposed to my pleasure or you're welcome. So it's just one of those things of reminding, right? Because people need to be reminded more than they need to be instructed a lot of the times.
Would,
And so, mhm,
I got a question for you, and then I'm going to come bring it to Bill. But would you
sure.
say, just to compare the two, would you say there are more prohibitions or more inhibitions that people face on a day-to-day basis?
I would say there's a lot more inhibition because I think of it like an iceberg. Like the inhibition part is the part under the water level,
Mm-hmm.
and because the subconscious is way more expansive than the conscious mind, and the
Mm-hmm.
prohibition is the part above the water that everybody can see and for the most part agree on. And
Yeah.
so that's the challenge is, being able to identify the inhibition so that you can actually have a say so and a choice around it,
Right.
around how you want to operate. So
Right. So I want to go to Bill just briefly. Bill, if you can just hit contrasting these two, and then I want to get into some like really identifying both inhibitions and prohibitions in action, get more specific in business. But Bill, what's your thoughts there in
Well,
contrasting the two?
sticking with my ethical framework,
Mm-hmm.
I would say the prohibitions would be the things that come from the ethical systems that people attach to. Whether it's I mean,
Mm-hmm.
religion's the easy one because there are great examples, especially of things that are written down.
Mm-hmm.
Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie,
Yeah,
those
right.
kinds of things. The Big
Yep.
Ten,
Mm-hmm.
and that and all the little ones, um,
Mm-hmm.
that that these are things that like Charlie was saying that most people agree on.
Yeah.
I mean, murder's an easy one across most cultures.
Yep.
It's a prohibition. It's written down. It's agreed upon for 99% of the people, and that's what it's going to be. I would also agree with Charlie that the inhibition, I think, is what we deal with more frequently on a day-to-day basis,
Mm-hmm.
because those are things that we put on ourselves, and no no ethical system can can speak to every situation that's going to come up.
Right. Yep.
The Bible doesn't mention tractors or grocery stores, so but we create these inhibitions that we use to bring ourselves through our daily lives. And sometimes they're bad and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
Again, I was thinking about something Charlie had said a long time ago about how boundaries are actually free, or can actually be freeing.
Mm-hmm.
And and so inhibitions aren't necessarily bad things.
Right. Right. So I guess that leads me in, and Bill, I'll come back here with you, and then going to Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to give some, since I think we've clearly established that prohibitions are very much more easily recognizable. Like you said, the Ten Commandments, or there's Charlie said the Bill of Rights, your customer Bill of Rights, or these are written down. Most people agree that hey, we're going to abide by these things. It's the high level stuff, right? So that's really, I don't think the challenge is much, although it can be in an organization. I think we want to acknowledge that. But what I want to get at, like you said, Charlie, is the iceberg kind of analogy is, and we can couple that with prohibition too. But I really want to get at identifying, and start with yourself. And I would recommend maybe go through. Let's give a couple examples you may have of inhibitions you have faced that have not, has kind of set you back from growing, scaling your business, taking on tasks. And these are what I'm going to focus on. Like I said, limiting beliefs, internal ways of thinking or believing that aren't serving you because they're inhibiting you. They're like a governor or limiting you. So I'm looking at it from that particular aspect. There are some good reasons why you want to have inhibitions too. but really trying to get at these ones, like you said, Charlie, that we're unaware, maybe unconscious about, that's affecting our ability to grow and scale our teams. It's here, and I'll give you, just to start it off, because I'm reading this book right now called 10x is better than 2x. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that book, but the idea is to change our thinking in because we're like, well, I can only do this. I can only do it 2 times because I can, in my mind, get that way. And you can't even envision something bigger. But if you actually do it bigger, it actually is easier and can accomplish much. But we have these inhibitions, or we have these stories that that we limit ourselves. So may I come to you first, Charlie, actually, because I know you just mentioned this. I'll come back to you, Bill. But just, can you give me at least an example for yourself and or team members that you faced, Charlie, just recognizing them?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of tools out there. You mentioned one of them, the 5 voices tool, to help with just self-awareness
Mm-hmm.
of how you operate, how you communicate and like to be communicated to. And so there's other ones like Myers-Briggs. There's our company personally, we use the Enneagram, which has 9 different personality types. And so that's part of our onboarding, is that everybody takes that assessment, so that way we have a baseline of understanding how somebody ticks, their
Mm-hmm.
natural tendencies. And then from there, I take them through our culture onboarding sessions of uncovering their stories, like those beliefs that they may have wound up landing on, that they're not even aware that's there
Right.
and running the show. And then, so these are 3-hour-long sessions. So that's the first step. And then the following week, we come back and get complete with the pass. And so I think you're going to get there at some point. And then,
Yeah, we'll get to some. But
yeah, exactly.
what's one that you've had, Charlie? What's a specific inhibition that you had that you
Yeah, for
recognize?
sure. Yeah, a story that I like to share with our team members when I'm onboarding them is letting them know that, like early on, for those that may, I don't know if I shared this on these podcasts before, but from 9 years old to 14, I was a novice, Buddhist novice monk for 5 years. And at the time, maybe I was 11 or 12, we were visiting the headquarter monastery up in Northern California. And bear with me here. I'm telling the stories because stories is what helps people relate it to themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the inhibition for me there is that at the time in our main prayer hall, somebody from the headquarter monastery asked if one of the young novice monks from our group of, maybe close to 20 of us can go on stage and share something. And so I wanted to make our group proud, so I volunteered to go on stage and recite out loud from memory this mantra that's called the Shrangama mantra. It's in Sanskrit, and it takes probably 15 minutes to read it all out from memory. And so I just remember I started forgetting lines halfway through. I don't remember if I actually finished. I just remember running out the door as far and as fast as I could. I was bawling. And in that moment, even though I didn't say it like verbally or spell it out in words, but in hindsight, to capture that feeling I had was basically I told myself I'm a failure, and no matter what I do or how hard I try, I'm always going to be a failure. And that essentially became the script of my life. Like everything that I did. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all develop strong suits to
Yeah.
overcompensate for those stories that we're unaware of and limiting beliefs. But things would go well in friendships in school or whatever relationships, and I would somehow self-sabotage. And I did the bare minimum in school because why bother trying if I'm going to fail anyway, so. And it wasn't until I actually became aware of it that I could choose differently. So that's just a specific example of something that could just linger and you're not even aware. I mean, I may as well have put that on my gravestone, right, Charlie? a failure and always will be if I never
Wow.
had uncovered it. So obviously I wouldn't be sitting here with you fine gentlemen today if I was still unconscious to that.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. No, I'm so glad that you have overcome and recognized that. How about you, Bill? What in yourself maybe, or in others that you recognize these inhibitions?
Well, I'd have to say for myself, the big limiting belief has always been imposter syndrome. Um, the belief that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, and doggone it, people don't like me.
Mm-hmm.
And that and it's like getting upstairs. I'd be at a point and I'd be like, no, I'm not good enough to do this. And then I'd meet someone or read something and discover it about myself that, wait a minute, I knew this. What makes this other person more special than me? And then I'd get up to the next level of the stairs, and and then I'd be looking up the stairs again and go like, oh no, that's beyond my ability. And then again, something would happen. I'd meet a mentor or a professor or someone who would take a little bit of belief in me and help me to the next level, to the next landing, as it were, the next plateau. And so yeah, I've dealt with that. When I was thinking, what am I going to do after I get my master's degree, and the doctorate stood, staring at me. I'm like, no, and I'm like, well, why not? If Doc C can do it,
Right? Yeah, that's like, look at this slide at the very top. What does it say on the slide here? Who says you can't? Right?
Who says you can't?
Yeah,
that's right.
Most of the time,
you're the only one who has you're the only one who has the voice important enough to say you can't.
Right.
And there's a pretty good chance you're wrong.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There we go. Let me get back there. Yeah, I think there we go. So I mean, I think the imposter syndrome is definitely one, Bill, I've heard too a lot of, and it's related to what you said, Charlie, too, that I'm not good enough. I know me, I wouldn't have started Steward Your Business if I hadn't got over the fact, like, who am I to start this business? Who am I to like go out there and do this? There's and what's been interesting since I've been on this journey now, coaching and consulting others as well, as I've recognized now, like I said, with the 5 voices, seeing some patterns in different ones. I know for me as a connector voice, sometimes I have had stories about avoiding some challenging situations because I didn't want to lose that connection, that energy, because I thought I would lose it. Like, oh, I'm being too critical. I'm not. I provide lots of support. Remember, we've talked about support and challenge in the previous episode. Provide lots of support, but I have the story or ambition, like, oh, I can't bring too much challenge or confront somebody, and so that obviously affected my my influence and really the results that I was able to achieve. And so I've learned to lean into that. It wasn't comfortable, but I've learned I can still connect positively, and we'll get more into that. But there's others that, like, and maybe you guys, because I think it's important, like you said, Charlie, identify this in yourself. Have you been able to, either one of you, and I'll just come to you first, Charlie, but have you been able to, once you start to identify yourself, start to clue in, maybe you can't exactly put your finger on it, but of a team member, family member, you're like, there's something holding you back and I don't know what it is, but you could just sense, right, that there's something, that there's some kind of internal they're being inhibited. So have you seen that, Charlie?
Yeah, that's where the tools help. Those are supporting guides to that we leverage. Like in our case, the Enneagram, in the giant framework, the 5 voices. There's also Myers-Briggs, like I mentioned previously, but they're all they all help us and support us to to move along that cause of
Mhm.
self-awareness, because
Mhm.
that's the first step. You can't make any other choices if you don't even know what's there that's running the show. So
Mhm.
and then actually having those introspection, those guided conversations that where you invite the your the people that you care about, or your teammates, your family, like you said, on that dialogue. But it
Mhm.
takes a level of openness to look,
Right.
because if there's an emotional wall always up, that's somebody's always guarded, and they're so oblivious that there's could be something that's running the show that they're not aware of. If they don't even want to go there, it takes, it's free will, right? Like,
Mhm.
even I'm not Christian, but even God can't mess with free will, right? So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
somebody is not willing to look, then it's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'll throw an example to you, Charlie, because you work in the tech space, technology, and there are some people, and I'll use like the guardian voice for those who know, but that this is a person that is very risk averse. So they may, like, if you know this about their inhibitions, potentially, like, this person is um hesitates to adopt any new technology because they feel like, hey, that's going to disrupt workflows. And so their inhibition is, I don't want to adopt things, it's going to mess up workflows. So if you understand that, right, Charlie, you have the awareness, the emotional intelligence, if you will, then you can come in and help guide them and show them how that is a limiting belief and a new possibility of what can be. But you
Right,
can't show them what can be if you're not able to get at, like, hey, what is it holding you back here?
right,
And it's like, well, I don't want this new cybersecurity software, it's going to be new, I have to adopt it. They're like, okay, I understand. There's what's the story, what's the inhibition here, right?
right, right.
Because then you
Exactly.
can, but if you're otherwise, you could get frustrated. Like, this person just doesn't know technology. They don't appreciate what technology can do and like how I can help them. And you're just getting frustrated and not really like getting to the root of, there's something here. There's a story. There's an inhibition that is not serving them.
Right.
Right. How, and so I'm going to come back to you, Bill. Have you, in looking, we talked a little bit about yourself, about working with other people and recognizing that. Have you been able to lean into that too, and seeing where people start to have some kind of inhibition or things that are holding them back?
Yeah. And I like understanding the whys and wherefores
Mhm.
of those processes, because for me it helps me to break free if I understand the nuts and bolts of what's going on. Um,
Mhm.
like one of the things that helped me break free of imposter was learning about the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's like, okay, I'm uncertain because I know a lot. And so it's like, oh, okay, so I get it now. And and it's like, and I can never know enough to break free of that entirely. So I
Mhm.
just kind of have to keep reminding myself. But yeah, you know, uh, um, when it comes to helping others, it's being able to point to specific things and say, look, this is exactly where this comes from.
Mhm.
And with knowledge you break the devil's power, if you will.
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
uh, if i can if I can go along with Charlie there and use
We
supernatural
infuse
references.
all sorts of things here in the Business Roundtable podcast, because we're pulling from all sorts of resources.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, but yeah, having knowledge breaks chains.
Mhm.
And if you're being held back by a limiting belief, understanding where that belief comes from
Mhm.
and how it works can help you break free of it.
Mhm. Mhm. So, as you, the listener, taking this in, hope you're reflecting and thinking about whether your leadership is being constrained by internal inhibitions or possibly external ones as well. And again, they might be kind of doubling up on each other. Um, you know, you may be, for example, have a um, fast-growing company might want to stifle innovation because they think that's going to mess up their process. So like, hey, no, we don't. We want to make sure you just follow this way and don't slow us down. So if you have a natural inhibition to um, not speak up when you need to speak up, that'll kind of aggregate, make it worse in the sense of, hey, we need the other voices, the innovation if something is going wrong. I remember the whole loans and all this thing that blew up in like 2007, and there's all these people that kind of went along, and nobody said something because they were inhibited. I just want to keep going. I want to figure out how to make money, and so other people would do things, and these were unhealthy inhibitions, and the prohibitions were, let's just keep going. Let's get as many people in. We're gonna, our prohibition is we will take everybody. We don't want to say no to anybody. So that was kind of the prohibition. Don't say no to anybody. Have stated income loans and all this other stuff. It was a disaster, and unfortunately, people, they didn't voices that needed to be heard. They had their own inhibitions, and they should have spoken up, and it got out of hand, unfortunately. So this is, I think, the impact. And I guess, coming back to you, Charlie and Bill, what are the negative impacts in businesses in particular, or here on the Business Roundtable podcast, if you allow these negative inhibitions and prohibitions to really take root in your organization? What's it cost? What's potentially at stake if we're not getting at these things? I'd start with you, Charlie.
Well, you really don't have any new possibilities, or you can't really create anything that's in alignment with your vision if the inhibitions are in conflict with the vision.
Mm-hmm.
The outside world is a reflection of the inner world.
Mm-hmm.
And so the transformation and the foundation of the vision that you have for your business and for the type of culture that you want to create is not even possible until you work at the internal level
Mm-hmm.
with each and every one of your teammates. And if you identify that somebody's just not a good fit, like they're not open to growth and transformation,
Mm-hmm.
to find the best in themselves, then you have to release them. It's your duty uh, as the business owner to protect the business and the culture, and you're not being mean. It's just they're not a good fit for your organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the hardest things for me is I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I want it sometimes more than they want it for themselves, and that's
Mm-hmm.
not going to work.
Yep.
And so you just have to identify, who's the right people that needs to be on your bus, and then you have to professionally release those. I actually heard this funny way of firing people from Jeff Hoffman. He was one of the founding founder of Expedia and all the different groups that are part of that. He says, "Man, you're amazing at interviewing. You need to get out there and do more of that." So it's just adding humor to a crappy situation. So.
Well, what I hear you say though, Charlie, is, if people are being unwilling to address the prohibitions and inhibitions, and they're resisting being coachable,
right,
then you have to make a change in the organization in order to get at those things, because that's going to negatively impact the success of the company. If they're like, no, exactly, I'm not going to address it, I'm going to stick my head in the sand. Yep. That's not the solution oriented people that you need on your team.
Right. One bad apple spoils the soup. So your A players are going to be wondering why you're allowing that person to be a part of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to necessarily say it, but what were you saying? Sorry.
Yeah. If you're saying, look, if they're the ones that are continually dragging the team down intentionally by their lack of awareness or understanding, then yeah, you do have to make a move. And we'll get into some more practical solutions here as we're wrapping up the podcast. But I do want just Bill to just comment on this. What the internal, external impacts of the for the company, for the individual, when they resist addressing these inhibitions and prohibitions head on, finding what's working, what's not working.
Well, one thing that that popped into my head was as Charlie was saying that a person may not be an individual, a prospect may not be a fit for the organization. The opposite is also true, that the organization may not be a fit for the person, and we're always thinking about from the organization's point of view, but people have to think from their point of view as individuals as well. That maybe this organization isn't working for me. And the question is, of course, why for both of those? Why is it our fault? Is it their fault? Who's the one with their head in the sand? And we do have to figure that out, because once we figure out whose head is in the sand, then we'll know who needs to work on the self-improvement.
Yeah.
And get rid of those limiting beliefs.
That's a great perspective. I mean, I think, I never liked having to fire people. That's obviously, nobody likes doing that. But if you can make it to the point where the person realizes, hey, this isn't the best fit for me, and they can recognize that, then they can move on to the right place. So I want to get here, as we're getting closer to the end of the episode, I want to get into some practical solutions for business owners and team leaders. And I thought, hey, we've been talking 5 voices. So I thought I'd give you the 5 voices, one for each of the 5 voices. And I'd love to have you guys also share or comment on these. I'll just kind of go through the spectrum. So nurturers are typically the quietest, right? They're the ones that are, the majority of folks are over 40% of the population, somebody's going to be a nurturer. So you're going to run into these nurturers. Nurturers are very quiet. They're relationally oriented. I would say as a nurturer, you might be inhibiting yourself from speaking up. So I would say encouraging them to speak up, to make sure their voice is heard, and your relational perspective is essential to team health. You may be minimizing that self. It's like, why does my voice need to be heard? I just want to make everybody get along, right? And so nurture is one of them. I'll go through all of them because I want you guys to give your thoughts here on and pick any of these here. Creatives, those are the people that are very innovative, right? They like to come up with new stuff, and they may suffer from rejection, right? Because you're like, they have all these different ideas. You guys meet these people that are like, oh my goodness, but most of their ideas are crap. They're not very good because they're not fully formed ideas. That's okay though, if they recognize that that's part of innovation, right? I think Steve Jobs said, like, I want to see failure because this is part of the process of the evolution of Apple and how we innovate. So if they recognize that and get over that inhibition of sharing, like, I don't want to share because I might reject it, they may like it, they'll help move the team forward. For guardians, we kind of talked to us a little bit this earlier about their need for thorough analysis, but also recognizing they have to be flexible and adapt with a dynamic team, and that sometimes they're focused so much on efficiency that they're inhibited from considering kind of team engagement or how to be flexible and dynamic. And they're like, I can't do that. That's good, And so thinking and challenging their ways of approaching systems and processes and recognizing that's not the end all be all. There may have some inhibitions and relating with others and talking through and being flexible. I mentioned myself, connector, bringing in more of a challenge because I have to balance support and challenge. So I have an inhibition to bring challenge because of my fear of, I want to be liked. I want to have that connection in a different way than the creative side, and just remembering that it's okay to bring challenge along with the support. And finally, the pioneers, those are those kind of visionaries. They, may feel like vulnerability is a liability, and I can't be vulnerable. I can't share that because I'm the leader. I'm the person that's pointing the way. But if they build this emotional intelligence and understanding, that actually could strengthen their vision and having people coming alongside them. So those are just real briefly, guys. I just wanted to give you a few of them. Feel free to comment on them or share your own. I'll come to you first, Charlie, and then Bill. Thoughts there or your own on practical solutions for business owners and leaders?
Yeah, I think just fostering that open communication
Mm-hmm.
and culture of respect,
Mm-hmm.
making it safe
Mm-hmm.
for people to speak up,
Yeah.
and I want to use the word flat organization, like
Right.
having people feel like they can't talk to somebody because of their title or whatnot. Um, and at the same time, it's just also um, EPR, right? Encourage, praise, recognize. Let people know that they are they are what do you call that? They're respected regardless of what they do, right? Because obviously they made through the interview rounds, so they're in your organization because they have a level of competency and alignment with what your company is about and
Mm-hmm.
and with your vision. And so I think oftentimes if we get too caught up on the doing, it it takes away from the humanness of it. So I would say let people know that you actually care and definitely be your word, honor your word, right? Whatever you
Yeah.
say that you're about, and actually follow through. And if you can't, um, you got to restore that, right? Like, and so that's the foundation that I would say, like actionable things. Um, leading by example. I would never ask any of our team members to do anything I'm not willing to do myself.
Mm-hmm.
So just being being honoring your word and leading by example. That
Yeah.
to me, those are actionable things that will inspire, the and attract the type of people that is going to be that you would want as part of your company, as part of your vision.
Yeah. Well, and I liked how you said, Charlie, earlier, when you're leading people from what you live, you're sharing, you're being transparent. You're asking, I'm not sharing or doing anything I wouldn't expect you to do. I think you're breaking free of your limitations and you're helping them make better decisions. You're engaging them and they're feeling safe and you're creating this environment. I think that those are great examples and you're being coachable and you're saying, I'm coachable and I want you to be coachable so that we together can win together.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because I've seen the threat of the opposite. If you get too critical
Mhm.
about how somebody's doing something wrong, then it's a vicious cycle because then they become fearful, and when they're operating out of fear of making a mistake, they wind up making more mistakes. And
Yeah.
so because they believe that they're flawed and defective as a
Mm.
human being, that they can't do right, and therefore they don't. And so it just further perpetuates that vicious cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. No, great thoughts. Bill, as we're getting close to the end of the episode, what are some, you've heard some of my suggestions from the five voices from Charlie. What are your thoughts, comments on those, or any other suggestions for practical solutions as a business owner or leader to overcome
Well,
these
I was
limitations?
thinking that yeah, I was thinking that one thing for like the quiet ones, the nurturers,
Hmm.
as you said,
Yep.
is to create feedback systems that they can
Hmm.
actually access.
Yeah.
Because and what comes to my mind is what I've referred to as the veil of protection that the internet gives to people,
Hmm.
and because of that veil, people who might otherwise not criticize anyone have
Hmm.
suddenly become trolls, which
Mm.
is going way too far. But it's the principle is the same, that if someone who is naturally quiet and perhaps a little shy can access the feedback system, they can act on their nurturing instincts without fear of reprisal or being criticized for their feedback.
Yeah. No, that's a great perspective. I think, yeah, if you know you have natural the inhibitions. Oh, you're back.
Okay,
You
it froze for
frozen.
a second.
I was just gonna say I liked your example, Bill, because if you know you have a natural inhibition, or once you become aware of it, and you know that it's still going to come up. We've talked about this before too, in the Know Yourself to Lead Yourself episode, and kind of tendencies, right?
Mhm.
These tendencies are going to continue to be there, but we can then provide a system, like you said, Bill. I really like that. Of okay, this is probably going to come up. What can I do to help overcome that? When it does come up, and I'm already prepared. This is really, I think, really, really key in the mental health space. I've talked with people that have, this isn't extreme places, but people that are dealing with, thoughts of suicide or challenges. You have to have something in place when that comes up, that way of thinking that doesn't serve you, because when you're in the depths of it, it's really, you're not going to think clearly. So you've got to have some things in place. So I really think that's a great idea, Bill. That think about that, or somebody that you can talk to, or you recognize, if you can recognize it, like you said, Charlie, having people share, like, oh, I'm recognizing that I don't. I was just talking to a gentleman today about he had an employee that said, oh, I really want to work on this this client, bringing him in, and he's had this client for like 2 years, and he's like, and you've only increased the sales very minusculely, and this client was before, and he's like, I really want to keep this client. He's like, I don't think you really do, because if you did, you would have done these other things. And he had to bring the facts to him, and like, oh, you're right. I wasn't actively. There was some inhibition. I don't know. We didn't get into the point of what the inhibition was, but he was faced and had a good supervisor, at least could reflect back and say, there's something here. I don't know what it is, but there's something in here that you're saying you want one thing, but in reality, you're inhibiting yourself because you're not getting the results, right? So having somebody in your corner, like one of us, will help you on the podcast or organization. This is the way we live from. That's why we have the whole Business Roundtable podcast to help. So I want to, as we're wrapping up the podcast, I'll come back to you, Bill, and then Charlie, but just final thoughts, final takeaways, and encouragement for business leaders on the whole topic of inhibitions and prohibitions. What would you want to leave with, Bill? Oh, he's delayed. Can you hear me, Bill?
Well, just that.
There you go.
Oh, can you hear me? I
Yes.
can hear you. Okay. Just that, that not all inhibitions are bad. That sometimes boundaries and limiting issues can be freeing in many ways. But to make sure you measure those beliefs and make sure that they are serving at least you, if not the greater good.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when it comes to prohibitions, you got to be careful with whose laws you want to break.
Or challenge.
But yeah, don't let yourself be held back by inhibitions, but don't get rid of them entirely, because some of them can help you.
Just look and see what is that, right? I think that there's
right.
There are some that serve you, but like you said, there's a big iceberg underneath. I like that analogy, Charlie, of other things that there's a lot in the messy in there. I think if we can get out and put those, like you said, Bill, the prohibitions have written down that are very clear. Oftentimes they're there to help us for the most part, and then they can hurt us too. But for the most part, they're clear. We all agree. And if we can get those out of our brain and written down and say, okay, this serves me. Like if it's swirling in our brain and we're not clear, we're going to be get stuck. Charlie, last thoughts on inhibition, prohibition on this conversation tonight.
Yeah, as Tony Robbins says, the greatest human need is to be congruent with the story that they believe about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to bring out the best in your team members, in yourself for that matter, you first awareness and identifying what those stories are is the first step, so that you're able to actually have a say-so in that story in which you want to operate from, or else you're just dealing at the surface level, right? You're not dealing with at the root. It's like you're trying to treat a disease based on like dealing with the symptoms only and not finding the root cause.
Yeah.
The root cause is the story, and those beliefs that you hold about yourself, whether you're aware of it or not.
Yeah. Get after it. Get after it. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Bill, for coming back. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, share it with those in your community, your network. We appreciate your 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform, of course. Like and subscribe. We're on YouTube. We're on LinkedIn. You guys can connect with us on your favorite social media platform. We're all out there. And we would love to hear from you. So thank you, Charlie and Bill. And until next time, everybody, take care, be well, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good night.